I remember the night as if it is etched into my skin. The rain was hammering against the windows, the kind of storm that makes the world outside feel as restless as the one within. I was setting the dinner table when Leo, my husband of 15 years, looked me straight in the eyes and said the words that sliced me open. "I want a divorce." His voice was not trembling. It was cold, rehearsed, as if he had already built a new life without me. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate, echoing the sound of my heart breaking. 15 years of devotion, of sacrifices, of believing we were one, collapsed in a single breath. I was 50 years old, staring at the man I had trusted with my youth, my dreams, my soul. But what shocked me more than his betrayal was the shadow standing just behind him, his father, Travis. A wealthy, powerful man in Tennessee, Travis had always been distant, a figure of authority I respected but never truly knew. That night, however, he was not just a witness. He was the one who stepped forward when Leo turned away. And little did I know, his presence that night would ignite a chain of events that no one, not even myself, could have predicted. Before I continue, let me pause to say this. I am deeply grateful to every single one of you who keeps coming back to listen to my stories. To those who have subscribed, you are the reason this channel is alive, and I cannot thank you enough. To my new viewers and those who are yet to hit that subscribe button, please know that your support is the fuel that keeps me sharing these raw, untold parts of life. If you feel touched by what you hear today, do not forget to subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts. I want to read your voices in the comments because your engagement is what keeps this community alive. Now, let me take you back to the night that changed everything. Leo and I were high school sweethearts in Tennessee. He was charming, a football star, with that boyish grin that made my knees weak. I believed he would protect me forever, that he was my safe place. We married young, when I was only 35, and for years I thought we had built a life worth envying. We bought a house, traveled when we could, and I poured myself into his dreams. I supported his business ventures, stayed up through his failures, and smiled through the endless nights when he did not come home. But slowly, cracks appeared. He became colder, distracted, his phone a weapon he guarded with his life. At first, I told myself it was stress, that maybe work was eating him alive. But the lipstick stains, the late-night calls, the scent of another woman's perfume on his clothes, they were whispers I could no longer silence. Still, I held on. Because I had given him 15 years. Because I believed marriage was not something you ran from when it grew uncomfortable. I was wrong. When he finally said he wanted a divorce, I was too numb to speak. He had already packed a bag. His eyes held no remorse, only freedom. And as he walked out, I crumbled to the floor, sobbing into my hands. It was Travis, his father, who picked me up. Travis was nothing like his son. Where Leo was restless and selfish, Travis carried himself with quiet dignity. His wealth was no secret. Everyone in our town knew his name. But what I never saw before was his gentleness. That night, he sat beside me at the kitchen table where my marriage had just died. He poured me a glass of water, his hand steady while mine shook. He said very little, but the weight of his presence was stronger than any words. "You are not alone, Eleanor," he told me, his deep voice calm as thunder rolled outside. "Do not let my son's weakness make you feel unworthy." I stared at him, tears blurring my sight. He was supposed to take Leo's side. He was supposed to scold me, blame me, remind me of my place.
But instead, his eyes carried something I had not seen in years: compassion. Days turned into weeks, and the shame of divorce clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't go to the grocery store without whispers behind my back. I couldn't walk into church without pity in their eyes. And every time I wanted to hide, Travis appeared. A phone call, a visit, a gentle word that reminded me I still mattered. It was confusing, it was dangerous, and it was forbidden. Because every time his hand brushed against mine, every time his eyes lingered a second too long, I felt something I shouldn't have felt. Something my heart had buried under years of pain. Love. Or at least the beginning of it. But before you judge me, understand this. I was broken. I was abandoned by the man who promised to love me until death. I was starved for affection, for a voice that saw me, for arms that reminded me I was invisible. And Travis gave me that. Still, there was something I didn't know. Something hidden beneath his kindness. Something about Leo, about the past, that would shake me to my core. And when I discovered it, my world would unravel all over again.
The days after the divorce papers were signed felt like a funeral without a casket. My marriage was gone, but there was no grave to visit, no flowers to lay down, no closure that felt real. It was as if Leo had erased me from his life with the same ease that he erased his name from our mailbox. I would wake up in the mornings and stare at the empty side of the bed, the indentation of his body no longer there. The silence was louder than any scream I had ever heard. I cooked less, laughed less, and moved through the house like a ghost. I could not even bring myself to pack away his shirts that still hung in the closet, their smell mocking me every time I opened the door. And yet, in the middle of that unbearable loneliness, there was Travis. At first, he showed up in the quiet ways, dropping off groceries at my door, fixing the leaky faucet in my kitchen, calling just to ask if I had eaten. He told me not to see it as charity, but as friendship. Friendship. That word felt foreign to me, especially from him. I had known him for over 20 years, but never like this. One afternoon, about 3 months after the divorce, I was sitting on the porch watching the sun dip behind the Tennessee hills when Travis joined me. He had that calmness about him, the kind that filled the silence without forcing it away. He handed me a cup of tea, his large hand steady, and said, "You cannot keep living as if your life ended with Leo, Eleanor. You are more than what he threw away." I stared at him, blinking back tears. "You sound like you know what it feels like." For the first time, his face softened in a way that startled me. He leaned back in the chair, staring into the horizon. "Because I do," he admitted quietly. "Leo's mother, she was not faithful to me. She left long before she truly left." The words hit me like a stone. I had always assumed Travis and his late wife had shared the perfect marriage, the kind of story people whispered about with envy. But now, sitting beside him, I realized even he had scars. That night, we talked for hours about betrayal, about loneliness, about the lies people live behind closed doors. He confessed that wealth never shielded him from heartbreak, and I confessed that love never shielded me from humiliation. In his vulnerability, I found a reflection of my own. But with that honesty came something else. Travis began to open doors I never knew existed. About Leo. He told me things I was not prepared to hear. That Leo had been reckless with money for years. That his failed businesses were not simply bad luck, but the result of gambling debts. That he had used my name, my credit, to secure loans I knew nothing about. I sat there frozen as Travis revealed it all. My 15 years of sacrifice had not only been underappreciated, They had been exploited. "He used you," Travis said, his voice heavy with disappointment. And I did not stop him. I thought he would grow out of it. But now, seeing the damage, I realized how blind I was. Anger rose in my chest, hot and suffocating. How many nights had I stayed awake waiting for Leo to come home, believing he was working late, when in truth he was squandering everything we built? How many times had I defended him to my family, to my friends, telling them he was simply stressed, when in reality he was digging a grave for us both? Tears burned my eyes, but they were not tears of grief this time. They were tears of rage. "Why are you telling me this now?" I whispered. Travis looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Because you deserve the truth. You deserve to know you were never the failure. He was." The weeks that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. I would wake up and instead of drowning in silence, I would find myself waiting for Travis's calls. We would go for long drives through the country roads, sometimes saying little, sometimes pouring out the kind of secrets that leave you raw, but lighter. I began to laugh again. At first it felt strange, almost sinful, but soon it became natural. He would tease me gently, saying I had a laugh that could make storms quiet. I had never heard Leo say anything like that in 15 years. And then came the night everything shifted. We were sitting in his study, a warm fire crackling between us. The scent of his cologne, faint but rich, lingered in the air. I was staring at the flames when he said, almost in a whisper, "Do you know, Eleanor, I have always admired you, your strength, the way you carried yourself through the years with Leo. I used to wonder how someone could love with such loyalty, even when it was not returned." My heart thudded against my chest. Admired me? For how long? And why did the way he said it feel more intimate than any confession I had ever received? I looked up and his eyes were on me, steady, unflinching, filled with something I could not name. For a moment, the air shifted between us, charged, dangerous. I should have looked away. I should have reminded him that I was his son's ex-wife, that this was forbidden, that this was madness. But I did not. I simply sat there, caught in his gaze, feeling my heart tremble like it hadn't in years. And that was when I realized this was no longer just comfort. This was something else, something forbidden, yet undeniable. But what neither of us knew then was that Leo would soon discover this fragile bond, and when he did, the storm he brought with him would tear apart everything we thought we had found. By the time autumn rolled into Tennessee, I was no longer the same woman who had sat trembling on the kitchen floor months earlier. Divorce had stripped me bare, but in that nakedness, something unexpected began to grow, and its roots were wrapped around Travis. I tried to fight it. God knows I tried. Every time I caught his gaze lingering a second too long, every time his hand brushed mine as we passed a cup of coffee, I told myself it was wrong. He was my former father-in-law. He was the man who had watched me marry his son, the man who carried the family name that I no longer did. And yet, the loneliness in me had found a mirror in him. We had become two wounded souls who fit together like broken glass, sharp, dangerous, but impossible to separate. One evening, I found myself at his estate. He had invited me for dinner, saying he did not want me to spend another night alone. I told myself it was harmless, just a meal, just company. But as I walked into his grand home, the air heavy with the scent of cedar and old books, my pulse betrayed me. We ate in silence at first, the clinking of silverware filling the void. Then he leaned back, eyes studying me with a gentleness that both calmed and unsettled me. "You know," he said softly, "Leo may have been my son,
But he never understood you. Not the way he should have. Not the way a man ought to understand the woman beside him. I set my fork down, my throat tightening. Travis, please do not say that. But it is the truth, he pressed, his voice steady. You gave him everything, Eleanor, and he treated you like a placeholder. The words struck deep because they were the truth I had buried for years. My hands trembled, and before I could stop myself, tears spilled over. I turned my face away, ashamed of my weakness, but he reached across the table and covered my hand. His touch was warm, grounding. In that moment, the room fell away. I could hear only the pounding of my heart, could feel only the weight of his hand, and I knew whatever line existed between us had blurred beyond recognition. The guilt came quickly after. At night, I lay in bed wrestling with my conscience. What would people say if they knew? What would the church whisper behind closed doors? How could I face my family, my friends, if they discovered I had found comfort in the very man who raised my ex-husband? But then there was the other side of me, the side that had been starved of tenderness for 15 years, the side that longed to be seen, cherished, touched. Travis awakened something in me I thought had died. It was not just attraction, it was deeper than that. When he looked at me, I felt as though my pain was not wasted, as though every scar had meaning. He did not pity me. He admired me. That was something Leo had never once given me. So, I began to let go of the chains of fear, little by little. We spent more time together, walks through the fields behind his home, long talks by the fire, moments of silence that said more than words ever could. And then, one night, the inevitable happened. It was raining again, like the night my marriage ended. I had gone to his house to drop off some paperwork he had helped me with. The storm had grown fierce, and he insisted I stay until it passed. We sat together in the living room, the fire crackling, the thunder roaring like an angry god outside. I do not know who moved first. Maybe it was me, maybe it was him. But one moment we were talking, and the next, his lips were on mine. It was not rushed, not desperate. It was slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that strips years of pain from your soul. My hands clutched his shoulders as his arms wrapped around me, and for the first time in decades, I felt alive. Alive. But even as my heart soared, guilt crashed over me. I pulled away, my breath shaking. "This is wrong," I whispered. Travis looked into my eyes, his expression calm, yet burning with unspoken truth. "You know, it feels wrong only because the world will not understand it. But tell me, Eleanor, does it feel wrong here?" He placed his hand over my heart. I pressed my lips together, unable to answer. Because in my heart, it felt more right than anything I had ever known. Days turned into weeks, and our bond deepened. But secrets never stay hidden forever. One afternoon, as I left Travis's house, I felt eyes on me. I turned, and there he was. Leo. Standing by his car, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury. The rain of that night had nothing on the storm in his gaze. "You! And my father?" The world tilted beneath me. The air was ripped from my lungs. My secret was no longer a secret. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to explode.
The confrontation came like fire meeting gasoline. Leo's voice thundered through the driveway as I stood frozen, rain dripping from my hair. "How could you, Eleanor? How could you stoop this low? After everything, after 15 years, you crawl into my father's bed?" His words were venom, meant to humiliate, to shame.
But beneath his fury, I heard something else. Not love. Not grief. Pride. Wounded pride. He was not broken because he lost me. He was broken because his father had seen worth in what he discarded. Travis stepped forward, his hand firm on my shoulder. His voice was low, calm, but laced with iron. Enough, Leo. You forfeited the right to speak to her that way when you walked out. Do not blame Eleanor for finding what you were too blind to give. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. My heart pounded as Leo's eyes darted between us, wide with disbelief. For the first time in years, I did not feel small under his gaze. I did not feel ashamed. I felt seen, shielded. Still, the weight of judgment loomed over me. I knew what the whispers would say in town. I knew how the church pews would feel colder, how the friends I thought I had would suddenly vanish. Loving Travis meant stepping into a storm fiercer than any I had endured. That night I lay awake replaying it all in my mind. The look in Leo's eyes, the firm defense in Travis's voice, the fear of being condemned forever. But in the stillness, one truth rang louder than all the noise. I had already been condemned once before. Condemned to loneliness, condemned to invisibility, condemned to 15 years of loveless marriage. And I survived. So why should I trade the chance of true happiness for the comfort of silence? The weeks that followed were a test of fire. The town gossiped, tongues wagged in grocery aisles and church parking lots. Some women shook their heads at me, others avoided my eyes altogether. I lost invitations to gatherings I had attended for years. I overheard words like shameless and desperate, whispered behind my back, but Travis never wavered. He stood beside me, tall and unashamed, holding my hand in public, speaking of me with respect in every circle he moved through. His confidence was contagious. He reminded me daily that love does not need permission to be real. There were moments of doubt. Of course, I'm human. Nights when I cried, wondering if I had ruined everything, if I had crossed a line that could never be untangled. But then he would take my hand and whisper, Eleanor, we are not defined by their judgment. We are defined by how we choose to live. Leo did not forgive easily. His anger boiled over in ways I will never forget. Threatening words, slammed doors, even attempts to poison Travis against me with lies. But the truth has a way of standing its ground. One afternoon, during a heated argument, Travis looked his son straight in the eye and said, Leo, you lost her because you never valued her. I will not make the same mistake. Those words silenced Leo in a way nothing else ever had. For the first time, he walked away not with victory, but with defeat carved into his posture. And for me, it was liberation. Years later, when I look back, I see a woman who rose from ashes she thought would bury her. At 50, I had been tossed aside like a worn-out book. At 51, I was reborn in love I never imagined. Yes, a forbidden one. Yes, a complicated one, but one that healed me more deeply than it wounded me. It was not perfect. No love is. But it was real. And sometimes real is the greatest gift life can give. To you listening now, maybe you have carried shame for loving someone the world said you should not. Maybe you have been betrayed, abandoned, or made to feel invisible. Hear me. Your worth is not tied to the ones who broke you. Love can be found in the unlikeliest of places, and healing often wears a face you least expect. If there is one lesson my story carries, it is this. Do not let fear of judgment steal the chance of joy from your hands. Life is too fragile, too fleeting to live only for what others will say. That is my truth. That is how a woman, once broken by her husband of 15 years, found love again in the most forbidden, yet most genuine place. His father's arms. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence and loneliness, or risked everything for the chance to feel alive again? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if my story touched you in any way, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support is what keeps stories like mine alive. Stories that remind us of the resilience of the human heart.